It is very hard to see how the great fighters are leaving the boxing stage and how they're hanging up their gloves. Usually we can see the downfall of the fighters in UFC, who are still keeping to perform despite that their time is gone. Tony Ferguson just broke the record of BJ Penn, 8-fight losing streak. Despite that, this fighter was the most dangerous in the lightweight. Gennady Golovkin was the most dominant fighter in middleweight. He even is in a Guinness World Record book because of his incredible knockout ratio, 88.1, the highest for all middleweight history. But in 2017 he faced Canelo Alvarez, the rising superstar who earned his title shot, and that fight was a one-sided beating from Gennady Golovkin. It was obvious that the victory is in his pocket, but suddenly, because of incompetent judge Adelaide Golovkin was robbed and that fight was ended as a split draw. A year after, Gennady Golovkin faced Canelo Alvarez again, and here in that fight Gennady looked primitive. That was the big question: what happened? Why Gennady Golovkin is losing? That fight was ended by majority decision loss of Gennady Golovkin. Everybody forgot that he's already 37 years old, and it's too much for a fighter like Gennady Golovkin, who had 38 wins and no losses. His defense was awful. He missed a lot of punches. That fight was the example what is happening when the fighter passed the limit of the missing shots. But what happened later is a miracle. The main reason why Gennady Golovkin started to lose is his coach, Abel Sanchez. Gennady Golovkin was born in Soviet Union, Kazakhstan, but for this time everything was different. Soviet Union boxers used their Soviet Union boxing school. Because of battle with capitalism, the professional boxing was restricted. That's why they used an old Olympic system where only quantitative punches was important. No knockouts, no knockdowns. But Gennady Golovkin was under Nikolai Lee, who is a ward of unique boxer who was in Germany's captivity during the First World War. Boris Denisov. He lived in Germany and was a professional boxer. He was the first man who brought the professional boxing school in Soviet Union. That's why Gennady Golovkin is already from the beginning a professional boxer, who is fighting in the crouched stance, and the main goal is a knockout. When Klitschko brothers formed their key two promotions, Golovkin already started to perform as a professional. Because a lot of Soviet Union fighters are keeping fighting as they were amateurs, with the lack of knockout punch. Vasily Lomachenko still has a lot of problems on the pro ring, and that was the reason why he lost the fight to Teofimo Lopez. But with Gennady Golovkin happened an opposite thing. When he started to work with Abel Sanchez, he became a very primitive boxer. During all training camps, Golovkin had a lot of workouts. Sanchez has no game plan for a fight, only go and punch. He's not improving any specific things as boxers. That's why when Gennady Golovkin became elder, he started to boxing very primitive. In the fight with Canelo Alvarez, he had only 1-2s. Also, Golovkin was criticized because of his awful defense, because he missed a lot. Despite that, there are a lot of jokes about his strong head. The fight with Canelo Alvarez showed that it is over. Golovkin became slow. He started to miss a lot. He can't fight on the close distance as he was young. Even in the fight with Kell Brook, we could see that he's not defending himself properly. Despite that, Kell was at his prime. He was 2 weight classes lower than Golovkin, and Gennady already had some troubles with him. Despite that, he could end this fight by losing less blood, and if in the first fight it was a one-sided beating with Canelo, here Golovkin already stepped back because Canelo rushed forward because he'd done his homework. The same as it was with Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward, where Gatti lost the fight to Ward once because Arturo decided to brawl. and when he decided to boxing, he defeated Mickey Ward 2 times. Everybody was surprised because Golovkin became very primitive. Gennady Golovkin knew about that and decided to switch the coach. He fired Abel Sanchez and hired Jonathan Banks. HBO will close their boxing channel a little bit later. Gennady Golovkin signed the contract with DAZN and Matchroom. Everybody was surprised as well because he's an old 37 years old fighter, and there is no reasonable to spend so much money for Golovkin because he's not the same as it was before. But Jonathan Banks set 3 parameters to improve in Golovkin's game plan: the quantity of exit punches, the defense, and the rhythm of the fight. It was already obvious during their pad work for the fight with Steve Rolls. He started to be lighter on the feet, he started to swing the pendulum, and he started to throw a lot of combinations. Looks like mini Mike Tyson. For the returning of Gennady Golovkin on the ring, it was chosen the maximum safest opponent in Golovkin's career. Despite that, he was an undefeated, but the record was bad and he was more as a filler for Gennady Golovkin for leading him to the title shot. That fight happened on the Madison Square Garden, a very huge arena for that kind of main event, because only one man in the main event is a superstar. Right from the first seconds we can see that Gennady is keeping the distance and not standing like it was in the previous fight anymore. Right before that, he preferred to fight on the close distance. Here he is doing it differently. It is obvious that he started to make some touches to the body, because this distance isn't habitual for him. Golovkin made a lot of intelligence, and only at the end of the first round he started to make his hard punches. At the beginning of the second round, it was obvious that he's looking where to punch. In his previous fight, he just threw a lot of punches, no matter where to. Steve Rolls was knocked out in the 4th round. The reason why Gennady Golovkin was signed to DAZN is the 3rd fight with Canelo Alvarez. Oscar De La Hoya clearly said that in his interview, but the tough test was in front of Triple G, Sergey Derevyanchenko. The fighter was younger than Golovkin and was at his prime shape. It was obvious that he was ready to finish Gennady Golovkin, and he said in the press conference he's going to retire Gennady. He's not a walk-through fighter. This is the man who's a knockout machine, and when he faced Daniel Jacobs it was a very hard fight. Sergey lost the fight only by split decision. Of course, Golovkin is a high-class boxer, but at the moment of the fight he was already almost 38 years old versus 33 years old guy who's at his prime. Here from the first round we can see that Derevyanchenko increased the rhythm of the fight immediately. By doing intelligence, it is obvious that Golovkin is going to start slow, but he's still keeping the distance. And Gennady performed a knockdown immediately in the first round. It was so hard. But during the next round, it was obvious that Gennady Golovkin is going to survive in that fight, because he's taking this only because of his defensive style. We can see clearly that he's trying to chase Sergey, but he misses a lot as he fought before. And from that moment, a lot of people started to think that the victory was presented to Golovkin in that fight and Sergey clearly won that. We can see that even through the scorecards, because after that round the judges even couldn't put the same decision for the round. Chris Mannix scored that fight as a draw, but we can see that Sergey started to take the rounds one by one. At the end of the fight, both faces were smashed. The victory was given to Gennady Golovkin by unanimous decision. That was the question how Gennady Golovkin survived this brawl with Sergey, because his next opponent became Ryota Murata. This fighter was an undefeated, with a record of 21 victories and 1 loss. 38 years old fighter who survived a lot of brawls. It is a big question how he would stand with the new line. That fight happened behind closed doors because of fake useless restrictions because of disease, which is less dangerous as flu. And here we can see that Golovkin started to fight smart. There are no incredible rhythm as it was before, and it looks like calm sparring. Golovkin is not trying to force the momentum. Despite that, he's dangerous here. And he even dropped down Murata. From this fight we can see that Golovkin started to work more as a counterpuncher. He started to save his gas tank as long as he can, and that fight was ended as a round stoppage. In 2022, Gennady Golovkin faced Ryota Murata in Japan, where he faced a veteran fighter championship level, and here the crowd was allowed to enter in masks. The virus is not dangerous anymore, and a day before that fight Golovkin turned 40. Here it is more obvious that Golovkin started to save his gas tank more. The rhythm of the fight is the same as it was in previous fight. And even Ryota started to gain the pressure. He decided to exhaust the opponent, and then jab out his head to slow him down. Imagine what would happen with a fighter who's at his prime. At the end of the first round, it was obvious that Golovkin started to breathe hard. And this tactic started to work because Jonathan Banks taught Golovkin how to work smart. That's how he knocked out Murata in the 9th round. But suddenly it was announced that Golovkin is going to fight with Canelo Alvarez, who is now at his prime. For the 3rd time, 40-year-old fighter versus Canelo Alvarez, who just became an undisputed champion and just went to the light heavyweight where he lost. But he is at his prime. And that was the answer. Golovkin can't take it anymore. He forced only the 1st round, and he forced it by defensive style. But already after the 2nd round we can see that Golovkin is striking single shots. No more combinations. At the same time, when Canelo is gaining momentum, Golovkin is simply not ready for an exchange, and he started to work hard only in the late rounds. It was obvious that Golovkin is over, but Jonathan Banks was able to extend Golovkin's career for 3 more years.